con el Star Citizen Live, que en este caso es mesa redonda de Alien Week. Dentro asunto. Bueno, saludos Rojiri, saludos Superpelado, saludos Chinarro, saludos Zorro, saludos Guti, saludos Martín, saludos Metabaron, saludos La Crew, saludos Dark, saludos Zorro Rojo, saludos Soliza, no me olvida nadie, Metabaron, Randur y dentro asunto, venga. Y saludos Eco también. Ahí estamos, a ver si han respondido.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Star Citizen Live. This week is our Alien Week Roundtable. I'm your host, Jared Huckabee, and if you've never seen Star Citizen Live before, it's where we take about an hour out of our days at the end of a week, usually on Friday. Are there any other days at the end of the week? Probably not. It's a good show already. To basically sit here, hang out with some of our Star Citizen community members. Sometimes we answer questions, sometimes we explore process.
Nos está explicando todo el proceso de lo que es Star Citizen Live, que es un programa que hacen a final de semana, donde podemos tener la oportunidad de hacer preguntas a los creadores de Star Citizen, los desarrolladores y demás.
Which is our celebration of all the different cultures throughout the Star Citizen universe that aren't us, I guess. So let's go ahead and go around the group and introduce our panel of guests. We'll just start in the upper left here and just go clockwise. That means Sherry, you're up first. Sherry, who are you and what do you do for Star Citizen?
Hi, I'm Sherry. I am the archivist / associate writer at Star Citizen. Sorry, there's some voices in the background that it just happens when you're at home. Some people are in meetings at the same time that you're recording a cool video for everybody. But I do the alien language stuff with our very talented, wonderful language contractor Britton Watkins. Do space science and do the Galactopedia, which you may have heard of once or twice.
Bueno, dice que se disculpa porque hay sonido de fondo, es lo que pasa cuando están en situación de estar en casa, que hay varias meetings al mismo tiempo. Y está comentando que se dedica a hacer tanto lo que es el tema de los lenguajes alien como trabajar en la Galactopedia.
And I want to compliment you on your Seven Samurai poster in the back.
Thanks, it's vintage.
All right, moving clockwise over. Dave, who are you and what do you do for Star Citizen?
I am Dave Haddock. I'm the narrative director and do a bit of everything. Probably too much. And also, Jared, just to correct you, I think Saturday would also be another end of the week. It's not just Friday. So
yeah, it's an option. It's an option.
Yeah, just saying. If you want to get technical.
See, I was going to compliment you.
No, dice que está como en broma tocándole un poco las pelotas a Jared diciéndole, bueno, que en realidad técnicamente el fin de la semana es el sábado, no el viernes, técnicamente hablando. Y que comenta de que hace un poco de todo, ¿no? Es uno de los mandamases de la narrativa y que se dedica a hacer un poco de todo y quizás a veces demasiado, dice.
Is you on your Seven Samurai
En plan
poster? No, I'm
bromeando.
not going to. It's not as nice as Sherry's. Moving down clockwise, Will, who are you and what do you do for Star Citizen?
Hi, I'm Will. I help Star Citizen. Sorry, which camera should I look at? This one?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I'm the lead writer here at Star Citizen. I do all sorts of narrative stuff. That's one of my favorite things about Star Citizen is narrative is everywhere. So yeah, we help write missions. We come up with world building stuff. We come up with cool aliens that we're going to talk about today. So yeah, it's a really great.
Bueno, esto se dedica, es el líder de escritura, de narrativa para Star Citizen y dice que bueno, estaba bromeando al principio, sí, soy Will y ayudo a Star Citizen, ¿no? Pero bueno, en general hacen más tareas como colaborar con otros equipos de desarrollo a la hora de, por ejemplo, si le piden información para desarrollar un entorno, un mundo o una historia, pues siempre recurren a ellos para reforzar sus bases en la narrativa del juego, en el lore del juego, ¿no?
Project to be a part of. Thanks, everyone.
And excellent work on your Seven Samurai poster.
Thanks. I'm thinking about upgrading to an 8 Samurai, but I'm waiting for it to come out.
And last, there's Adam. All right, so on the show this week, we are... No, Adam, who are you and what do you do for Star Citizen?
I mean, you hit it right on the head. I'm Adam, and I'm a writer, so I work with Dave and Will and Sherry on everything they just described. I support them and helping develop everything we're doing, the cultures and stuff like that. So yeah, that's about it.
Bueno, pues Adam se dedica a desarrollar las culturas que están creando, ¿no? De todo el tema alien, el tema, por supuesto, también la raza humana, o sea, todas las culturas que están haciendo, ¿no? Con David, David, Will y Sharon.
I feel your Seven Samurai poster is not as nice as everybody else's. I want to be honest.
It's okay. It's got a big tear in it, but it was still nice.
Right. So, what are we doing this week? This week is the kickoff of a round of festivities we're referring to as Alien Week. You can learn more about everything that's going into that on the robertspaceindustries.com website. What we are doing today is we are answering your questions related to the lore, the history, the background of the alien races that populate the Star Citizen universe. As usual, we take questions from multiple sources. If you're watching live in Twitch right now, you can submit your question with the word question in...
Está comentando que podemos enviar preguntas en Spectrum si vemos el show en directo o ponerlas en el Spectrum, ¿no? También. Y luego son votadas y son escogidas.
We'll use that to help pull the questions out of all the other conversation. We also put a thread up earlier in the week to collect questions and allow them to be voted up by our backers, maybe for folks who couldn't be here or just to see which ones they wanted to see answered first. So we're going to start in with those as is wont to do. I do want to remind folks as you're submitting questions this week that we are here with the lore team, the story team. If your questions are, when is this ship coming out?
Bueno, si vuestra pregunta es sobre cuándo esta nave va a salir, pues este no es el lugar adecuado. O sea que solo pueden ser preguntas relacionadas con el lore.
Will we be able to play alien races in the game, which was another real popular one that came up, stuff like that? These are not the folks for that. Will we be able to have aliens as NPCs? There were lots of great questions, unfortunately.
Sí, como otras grandes preguntas del estilo de cuándo podemos poder jugar aliens o cuándo vamos a poder tener aliens y NPCs, que ese tipo de preguntas no tienen que ver con ellos, ¿no? Sino con el desarrollo del juego en general, o sea que no pueden responderlas, ¿no?
This is not the group for those, so keep your questions story focused and we should be good from here on out. The first question, the most top voted question, was one that you could probably anticipate. It was simply when will we find out more about the Kurthak?
¿Cuándo vamos a saber más acerca del Karzak? Los Karzak, que sepáis que son una raza que han estado en guerra con los Xian y no tenemos conocimiento de ella, supuestamente porque los Xian tampoco les interesa que sepamos nada de ellos, pues han estado en guerra con ellos durante años y años y años, y entonces poco se sabe, ¿no?
The most elusive of Star Citizen's alien races.
Yes. At some point?
Eventually.
Yeah,
Eventualmente, en algún momento.
I know it's hard sometimes because we have all this lore that's building and you want to know everything right away. But we mentioned this before, but it's really trying to strike that balance between having fun stuff and establishing the universe now and really saving stuff to be experienced for the game in general when it comes down. So we're always...
Claro, dice que por una parte que se trata de tener, o sea, lo que tratan de hacer ahora es tener un sistema balanceado en el juego, una historia balanceada, para que podamos experimentar ahora, pero también guardar cosas para cuando ya el juego esté en Gold y todo eso, y ya realmente, pues, ahí realmente se puedan experimentar esas nuevas aventuras.
Trying to balance it, whereas, like, this is a really fun story we could share right now, but wouldn't it be cooler if players got the surprise of it, got to experience it for the first time in game playing it? So
claro, dice que podrían contar una historia genial que tienen ahora por ahí, pero no sería mucho mejor dar la oportunidad a los jugadores de que podrían experimentar eso en el juego, ¿no? Mientras lo juegan en el futuro.
we have our secret treasure trove where we keep things hidden and safe.
Yeah, and
Claro, dice que tienen como una especie de lugar secreto, por así decirlo, donde van guardando todas las cosas ahí para el futuro, ¿no?
And again, there's also like we're still kind of working our way through the Xi'an and the Banu and the Tamaran and the Vandal and stuff like that. So, I mean, to give some context for anyone who's unfamiliar with the Kurthak, they were actually originally a stretch goal, which was kind of funny. But yeah, so they were definitely like conceived of to be a little bit further down the line. But there was also an expectation at the time of whether we would hit it or not, which was so it kind of needed to have enough of a flavor when introducing it that you kind of got a sense of how they would fit into the universe, but also give ourselves an out in case we didn't hit it. So if they disappeared, the universe wasn't suddenly having to rewrite itself to factor in an alien race that suddenly was gone. But
Since we've gained.
Vale, dice que están como intentando encajar lo que es el tema, ¿no? En que el caso de que primero ver si hay suficiente, digamos, contexto para que puedan aparecer, o que realmente sí, en el caso de que hayan llegado a desaparecer por lo que fuese, o sea, por lo que fuera, que no tengan que tampoco volver a escribir algo para que una raza que no haya existido, aunque es uno de los stretch goals de la financiación. Pero bueno, que es en plan que ya veremos cómo va en el futuro, o sea, no queda otro que esperarse.
Quite a few citizens since those early days. There are probably many folks who maybe never even heard of the Kurthak. I know you gave us the stretch goal thing, but do you remember the blurb, the log line?
Yeah,
the primer for them.
The original thing was that basically they were they had not mortal enemies of the Xi'an, but they were basically located on the opposite side of the Xi'an Empire from the UEE. So, but they had been locked in a very, very long war with the Xi'an called the Spirit Wars, and the Xi'an were very, very cagey about telling us anything about them.
Pues está comentando lo que estaba comentando, ¿no? De que han tenido lo que sí que se sabe. Me estaba preguntando Discolando, para aquellas personas que no sepan nada de los Kartak, que explique un poco. Bueno, pues lo único que sabe es que es una raza que estaba como al otro lado de lo que sería el tema del Imperio de la UE, del Imperio Xi'an, Imperio de la UE, y luego los Kartak. Y como que llevan estando en una guerra estuvieron en una guerra muy duradera llamada las Spirit Wars, las guerras de espíritu, ¿no? Y bueno, que los Kartaks, o sea, que los Xi'an son un poco callados en cuanto al respecto de la información de los Kartak, ¿no?
And really wanting to make sure that we didn't kind of make contact with them. So that was the kind of original pitch.
Claro, y dice que ese es el cuadro original, ¿no? El que los Xi'an querían estar seguros de que no hiciéramos contacto con los Kartak. Lo que podría pasar de ahí, pues imaginaron, ¿no?
Set up for them.
Right. The question from the chat: will you just reveal already that the Kurthak are the cat people from Wing Commander? That might come from a B. Lesnick. I'm not sure.
I doubt it, because he wouldn't have called them cat people.
That's fair. That's fair. That's fair.
Bueno, dice que si sería parecido a la gente gato del Wing Commander. Yo no he jugado a Wing Commander, no lo sé. Si los Kartak podían tener algo que ver con ellos, ¿no?
Heck.
Can I also just take the time to wish everyone a happy First Contact Day? So.
Happy First Contact Day.
Yeah.
Do you want to take a moment to explain what First Contact Day is?
It's the day where we had first contact.
Yeah.
With?
The Banu. The Banu were the first alien species that we came into contact with. It was a fun misunderstanding. You can read about it on the website, but it was, Banu out wandering around, and it was very tense, but it went pretty well considering when Banu had been one of our longest and closest allies through for the Empire's up and downs.
Well,
Me está comentando de que se celebra, bueno, está diciendo feliz día del primer contacto a todo el mundo, ¿no? Y bueno, ¿qué es el día del primer contacto? Bueno, pues el día del primer contacto es la primera vez que los humanos tuvieron contacto con una raza alienígena, que fueron los Vanu, y que fue un poco tensa porque había Banduls por allí andando alrededor y tal, pero que afortunadamente salió bien y han sido buenos aliados en tanto pues lo que son los altibajos del Imperio, ¿no? Los altibajos del Imperio. Y bueno, los Vanu en realidad no es que sean buenos aliados, es que billetaco. O sea, los Vanu se llevan bien con los Vandul, se llevan bien con todo el mundo. Ellos lo que quieren es billete.
I mean, to be more clear, it was he was running.
Was it Johnny or Jimmy or what was his
Jerry.
name? Jerry.
Jerry.
Yeah,
And
they.
then he got shot at by a human.
Jerry the Banu.
I think if it had been any other species, it might have gone quite a bit different. But the Banu were with the punchers pretty well.
Yeah.
Right. The Banu are interstellar friends to all.
What can you tell us about? We know about the Vandal, the Banu, the Shion, the Tavaran, and we just got done talking about the Krthak. What can you tell us about species on developing worlds?
¿Qué nos podéis decir acerca de especies en mundos desarrollados?
Well, we have a few of those. For those who don't know what a developing world is or a developing civilization, it's one that is inhabited by a species of that is self-aware. You might call it sentient in some works of science fiction. They use tools. They're like developing technology. Like they're moving forward onto a path that seems to indicate that one day they will join us in space. And the UEE has this law in place called the Fair Chance Act that prohibits interference from any of the developed civilizations.
Bueno, aquí esto evidentemente es algo que es un guiño, una influencia muy clara de Star Trek. Y es que nos está comentando de que hay civilizaciones que sí, que empiezan a estar, que usan herramientas, que empiezan a usar tecnología, que se le ve una clara dirección de que van a llegar a estar a nuestro lado en el mundo de las estrellas, en el universo, ¿no? Pero hay una ley que se llama la ley de la oportunidad justa, la Fair Chance, y pues es lo mismo que la Prime Directive de Star Trek, ¿no? Que ellos no pueden influir en el desarrollo de esa civilización hasta que esa civilización pues pueda tener un motor de salto o evolucione lo suficiente, ¿no?
Basically, this was put in place to prevent another massacre of Garen II, which was a genocide of the developing species on the planet Garen II, conducted by a terraforming company that had ties to the Imperator Linton Messer the 11th. And it was the last inciting incident that led to the fall of the Messers.
Bueno, para aquellos que piensen que la UE son todo rosas y flores, aquí tenéis un ejemplo de cómo en Garan 2 una empresa terraformó un planeta como una especie entera por emperador Lirinth 11, Lirinth Messer 11, y bueno, pues se cargaron toda una raza, ¿no? La extinguieron terraformando. Entonces, por eso que a veces el mundo de Star Citizen, el ser de la UE no precisamente eso va a significar ser legalmente bueno, ¿no? Por así decirlo.
In the end of the Messer era.
Everybody knows the odd number Messers are the bad ones.
Just like the Star Trek movies.
Hey, I will broach no ill speak of Star Trek 3. It's a good movie.
That's Search for Spock, right?
That's Search for Spock. It's Christopher Lloyd inventing the modern day Klingon.
Yeah,
and they found him, so.
Mission accomplished.
It's all good. Yeah, we have a couple of developing civilizations. We have you might have just read about the Osoyans because I published a Galactopedia article on them. They we can't get too much into their final design, but we do know that they communicate light through color displays like cuttlefish.
Dice que tenemos otras civilizaciones así desarrolladas como, aparte de los Ozoyans, que dice que tienen un sistema peculiar de comunicarse, que se comunican por colores como algunos peces, que tienen como pantallitas de colores y hace así, en plan de se comunican así, ¿no? Con colorines.
Fascinating and very hard for us to parse because we use our mouth parts to speak.
It's like cuttlefish and Daft Punk.
I will throw out a fun behind-the-scenes trivia thing. I had actually, when the Asoians first appeared in the Lost Generation story, and I had done a rough sketch that I showed to somebody on the team of what I was sort of thinking they looked like, and I was told to, quote, never ever show that to the animators, end quote.
They would cry.
Yes.
Dice que la primera vez que empezaron los Osoyans, que hizo como una especie de boceto como podrían ser y tal, le dice que nunca jamás le enseñará eso a sus animadores. O sea, a la gente que se dedica a hacer el diseño de animación, ¿no? Porque llorarían.
Many a bad idea.
Comes from me.
Yes.
Dice, porque se refiere por el esfuerzo y el trabajo que puede llegar a hacer algo así, ¿no? Que va a ser chungo de cojones.
What are your thoughts on Vandal NPCs in the Persistent Universe?
¿Cuáles son vuestros pensamientos acerca de NPCs bandules en el universo persistente?
Watch out for them, probably.
Yeah.
Do not interact.
Yeah, run.
Yeah,
Correr.
I guess it's sort of a two-pronged question.
Vigilarlos. Te vas a tener cuidado con
whether
ellos, correr.
that's NPCs as far as like hostile forces that you could potentially come across, or NPCs as like, hey, there's a vandal shopkeeper named Jerry.
I was gonna say, that's exactly where I was going. Is there a Vandal
It's
Jerry?
always Jerry.
Along
Claro, si tener un tendero bandul o tener un NPC como tal de bandul que te vaya por ahí a liarla, ¿no?
with Vandal Jerry?
I mean, as it stands now, I mean, the hope is that as you start kind of getting closer to the systems that are, near the Vandal border, you're going to have to start dealing with them as a possible raiding force. But and we've alluded in the past that there are certain Banu that have managed to establish, trade relations with Vandal, but and sort of hinted that, there's a possibility that maybe a human could try and pull it off, but as it stands now, like, no one's ever done it. So good luck. Make sure.
Bueno, que se sabe que hay Vanus que han llegado a hacer negocios con los Bandul, pero hasta donde se sabe ahora ningún humano lo ha conseguido, así que buena suerte.
You wear your armor.
Yeah, and with the Vandals having clans and stuff, when we start getting to those border systems, I think, you'll start seeing kind of the differences start emerging between the different groups of Vandals you encounter, and that might take the form of, actually having recognizable. We don't want them to be a unified, just faceless force that attacks you,
Right.
and like all that kind of stuff. So there will be plans to develop it, but as far as like dealing with them while the active war is going on, I think that's going to be a tricky proposition for anyone in the UAE to accomplish.
Well, and also going off what Will was saying earlier, like, there is that thing too of, if, say, for example, like, we publish a thing next week that's like, oh, hey, so-and-so found Jerry the Vandal and he's super friendly and stuff like that. Like, that's not that satisfying from a player standpoint. Like, wanting to save the development of, where the future goes from here in the universe, like, until players can actually start to theoretically be able to affect that change is much more dynamic and interesting.
It's
Nos dice que quieren como esperar en caso de que se pueda, o sea, que realizar cualquier tipo de tratado de guerra o algo así con un bandul, que sería algo complicado. Y luego el tema de llegar a hacer, o sea, llegar a ese punto de que pueda realmente tener algún tipo de relación con bandul. Que sería en plan algo más ya con un juego avanzado y desde el punto de vista de que los jugadores pudieran impactar en algún punto de alguna manera a lo que es el desarrollo o los acontecimientos del juego, y que eso se llegara a dar, o sea, que fuese algo más trabajado, no que simplemente, que podría ser decepcionante que ya desde el primer momento podrías hablar con un bandul o algo así, ¿no? Que desde el punto de vista del jugador, tal como está planteada la historia.
it's kind of what you talked about before. There is a not insignificant amount of lore already out there for Star Citizen, and that said, it's still, I understand the desire to still keep things closer to the chest. Discovery is such a key aspect of Star Citizen's intent.
Claro, dice que hay un montón de lore ahora mismo en Star Citizen, pero todavía hay muchas cosas que se guardan para dejar una de las cosas claves del Star Citizen, ¿no? al disfrute, que es la experiencia de explorar.
Intended, endgame. You don't want to sit there and spoil everything on live streams.
Claro, no quieren sentarse ahí y spoiler todo en directo, ¿no?
All alien races are humanoids. How do you make them? All alien races they know about are humanoids. How do you make them different than humans?
I think that's a specious term, first of all. don't think we should be calling them humanoid.
Yeah, bipedal or die.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's always that thing of the. I don't know. For me, it's that sort of weird balance of like trying to. I mean, we are making a game, so there's that sort of the humans of Star Citizen, of the UEE and stuff like that. Like, you know, how do the Xi'an react with them and stuff like that. So you want to build those sorts of conflicts, and you know, humans believe this, so the Xi'an might believe that. If we want to make a little bit of kind of headbutting there, but yeah, I don't know. For me, you know, there's also that aspect of like trying to come up with like unique ways that they could have developed, like writing out. Actually, we did a time capsule thing for the Xi'an, so writing out their history, like big events that happened throughout their history, and that actually really helped kind of establish that mindset of how they would approach something as a completely distinct culture.
Yeah, I think a lot of things.
Me está diciendo de que por qué, o sea, la pregunta que fue de por qué todos los aliens son humanoides. Si están planteando hacer algo que sea distinto a lo que sea humanoide, y bueno, luego Sharon corrige con que, bueno, en realidad son bípedos, no humanoides, ¿no? Entonces, dice que a la hora de tratar de... o sea, David dice como, no sé, tal, a la hora de tratar a desarrollar a las razas y tal, para que puedan tener algún tipo de relación o de diálogo entre ellas, como que al desarrollar la historia de cada uno, pues tratas de pensar o de tratar de descubrir cuál sería la forma de pensar de los Xi'an y tal. Y ahí he dejado la conversación en ese sentido. O sea, no he respondido muy claro a por qué no hay, pues, centauros.
Too, for me, is when we start talking about them, and even though their physiology may be, you know, right now 2 arms and 2 legs and kind of a torso and kind of a general shape like that, I think a lot of the stuff that we can play with is in their senses and how they experience the world, and that gives them a really different perspective on stuff from us. Like, we really like the idea of the Banu are quite a hardy species, and they can survive temperatures well in excess of what we can on both sides of the range and different atmospheres and stuff like that. And so, like, them kind of being a little more maybe less cautious and blundering and going forward comes as a side effect of that being, you know, hardier. And, you know, the Xi'an have a very long life and they have like duller senses. And so like this kind of more cautious approach all feeds into that. And so we try to think about how are these seeing the world and how is that different than humans as we go. So I think that helps me a lot as a writer, kind of create when I...
Bueno, están explayándose un poco más en el tema, diciendo de que claro, de que a la hora de diseñar o pensar, por ejemplo, como eran los Vano, que pensaban en que eran un plan que iban con menos precaución a los sitios, que podían aguantar diferentes atmósferas, que podían tal, entonces que eso que tenían más adaptabilidad a los entornos, como que da la sensación de que, pues eso, de que son una raza más dura y que eso también le influye en la mentalidad que pueden tener, el desarrollo que pueden tener, así que como los Xi'an, que pues son una especie que vive mucho más tiempo, que serían más prudentes, se tomarían más las cosas con calma a la hora de ir a ciertos lugares.
When I'm trying to think about, all right, what is the Xi'an way of looking at this? What is the Banu way of looking at this?
Claro, y eso que nos ayudaría a cómo los Xi'an piensan o miran o que piensan de una cosa o demás, o cómo los Vano piensan de una manera o de otra, y que eso ayudaría a diferenciarlos también de lo que es la raza humana, ¿no? Las formas de ver que tienen las cosas los humanos.
All right, makes sense. Jared, will you marry me? Depends on the dowry. Make your offers to Ulf. He's my agent. Do the Banu use ground vehicles?
I mean, they use anything that they think is useful, so I'm going to tentatively say probably.
Utilizan los Vanu vehículos de tierra y dicen que ellos utilizan cualquier cosa que sea útil, así que probablemente.
Just to talk about this, like I know there's a lot of questions about wanting to expand out the alien ship, you know, thing, and by no means the alien ships that are available for sale right now represent the full range of what alien species fly and drive around in. We from the narrative team, ships are so important to Star Citizen that we have to be very careful when using them. Like the safer route for us is when we're talking about stuff hundreds of years ago, we have a little more leeway to kind of just write for what we need. But when we're talking about present day stuff and what you encounter, that takes a lot of coordination between us and the ship design team. And so
Dice que en lo que es el tema de naves, sé que se va a estar hablando mucho de las naves de Alien y además porque ahora están en la tienda y demás por el evento, pero que todo el espectro que hemos ahí, o sea, el espectro de naves que hemos ahí en la tienda no representa para nada el espectro completo de las naves que va a haber, pero a la hora de plantearse naves para ponerla in-game, tienen que tener mucho cuidado y porque al final tienen que tener mucho cuidado a la hora de trabajar con los desarrolladores para saber qué naves traen al juego y sobre todo en qué momento, porque relacionado con el tema de spoiler y demás y de las experiencias que pueden venir para el futuro en Star Citizen. Y
So it's not something we do lightly. So wondering about like, oh, where's the science ships? How come you haven't ever mentioned the Xi'an having a tank and like all this kind of stuff? And that's kind of the reason behind there, is that we really try to let them take the forward step with introducing a new ship into the universe, and then we follow up. So.
claro, y eso en plan de alguna manera, o sea, Star Citizen es muy importante, las naves, ¿no? En Star Citizen. Entonces, que también como que dejan que ellos tomen las primeras decisiones, los desarrolladores de naves y demás, que tomen las primeras decisiones y luego la gente de narrativo los apoya con el lore para tratar de encajar eso en el lore. Así que es uno de los motivos por cual no hay todavía registros sobre vehículos van o registros Xi'an de otras razas.
Are there any alien musical instruments planned?
¿Hay algún instrumento musical alien planeado?
Ooh,
Have you
good
developed
question.
The question was actually musical instruments planned or food, and we know all about food, especially the
I'll let
Banu
them talk about the food.
Banu
Oh, we have
delicacies.
so much food.
There goes the
Yeah,
rest of the hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eventually,
food
there'll be a
is-
Banu
yeah.
recipe book.
Yeah, food is a special interest of Will and me both. So we we have spent many a work hour like developing the cuisine of the different alien species. Look forward to learning more next week.
And it's also one of these things that we have a little more liberty with as a writing team in the game, because unfortunately yet we don't have a way for you to taste things when you click on it. But music and
Están hablando de que a la hora de desarrollar un instrumento que dice, bueno, pues es una buena pregunta y tal, y Discord completa diciendo sí, porque sabemos que también se han desarrollado otras cosas como la comida y tal, y están empezando a hablar de la comida, y sí que, de hecho, que Sharon y Will, que pasan todo el día pensando en ese tema de la comida, y que además que es una cosa peculiar porque no tenemos oportunidad como jugadores de probar la comida, ¿no? De saber el sabor.
stuff you can actually hear, and someone is actually going to have to build that music the way we describe it. So like animate it. So we have plans and ideas for that, but that'll take coordination down the road with those separate teams. But food, we can say this tastes like, spicy beetles, and you just have to take our word for that. So, yeah.
Bueno, que en el caso de la música, que podrían desarrollar a la hora de instrumentos, pues desarrollar de cómo queremos que suene eso, tal, y si podríamos tener oportunidad de escucharlo, pero en el caso de la comida, pues podríamos decir que simplemente sabe como escarabajos especiados y simplemente pues tendríais que tomarnos la palabra, ¿no? Y quedar conformados con eso porque no tendríamos oportunidad de probarla, ¿no? La comida alien.
Yeah, and even though we haven't specified a specific instrument, I know we have called out with the Xi'an that they
the opera,
do
yeah.
love like a certain type of opera, which you could almost compare to like very minimalist kind of like modern classical music, where it's very drony and drawn out, since they have long lifespans, and that takes them to a meditative state. So we can describe that experience, and
Dice que de la música se sabe un poco, de que le gusta como una especie de ópera, rollo minimalista, moderna, en el cual la música se va expandiendo y luego contrayendo, en plan de que se puede, o sea, de que deja como espacios para la meditación en la música.
it would be like a day-long opera rather than like a 4 or 5 hour opera. So it's we have ideas for where we would like to take that.
Que sería en plan como una ópera que durase todo el día en vez de solo unas horas, ¿no?
Some sound, but again, it's not something we would go out there and say it's got to be this specific instrument, at least at this point.
And we've talked a bit about the Tavaran having this kind of unified chanting system as kind of like a timekeeping and keeping everyone in lockstep, kind of for their movements and stuff, and so like bringing all their voices together.
Yeah, it was about kind of, again, because the Tavaran also kind of came from a planet where they were, besieged by a lot of predators. So the idea with their music was that it would be a lot of like the drum circle becomes kind of the classic example, but this idea that it's about augmenting your numbers to make it sound like you're a really big, fearsome thing. So it was that sort of coordinated, like I said, kind of rhythmic type thing to kind of amplify your size or boast about kind of the size of like, you don't want to come over here. There's a big thing here that will mess you up.
Me dice que, por ejemplo, en el caso de los Tebarin, en su planeta natal, en su planeta de origen, que había especies, digamos así, jodidas, y entonces que una de las formas que tienen también de canción o de música es el tratar de hacer voces entre todos, coordinados de tal manera de que así pues daba la impresión de que cuando cantaban sus canciones y demás, pues una especie de cánticos, ¿no? Daba la sensación de que ahí había algo muy gordo, porque estaba todo coordinado, entonces daba algo muy gordo en plan de para alejar a las criaturas peligrosas, ¿no? Que había alrededores.
I like to imagine that the Teverin can all harmonize with anyone, like John Denver could.
Yeah.
So I
And
guess,
the
spoiler
Banu,
alert, they are John Denver.
and the Banu didn't really have much of a music culture before they encountered the humans, and so like they've taken to human music strongly, as it's a well-known fact that they enjoy karaoke, and also because of their less sensitive hearing, they really like music cranked to 11, and so it can be dangerous to go to a Banu concert.
That's one more.
Vale, dice que ellos, los Vanu, con respecto a los Vanu, que no tenían una cultura musical desarrollada hasta que conocieron a los humanos, que se volvió bastante famoso, pero que debido al mal oído que parecen tener los Vanu, que no es recomendable ir a un concierto Vanu porque nos quedaríamos sordos.
This one seems pretty broad. Tell us about Tavarin who serve in the UEN. Are there Tavarin that serve in the Navy?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the
Hay Tevarins que sirven en la UE, en la Marina, y dice que sí que...
the current senators, is the first Tavaran senator elected, was formerly in the Navy and had kind of had joined the Navy to essentially earn his citizenship, and then obviously kind of like integrate. And a lot of Tavaran like to join the Navy or stuff like that as a way to better integrate into the society, and they see it as a ladder to maybe kind of to get to better positions and stuff like that. One of the current
Dice que muchos Vanu han visto también, bueno, que hay un senador Vanu incluso, que estuvo en la Marina, y también el hecho de que los Vanu, los Tevarin, que hay un senador Tevarin que estuvo en la Marina, y ven como que los Tevarin ven como una oportunidad de integrarse mejor en la sociedad, porque sabéis que fueron absorbidos después de la guerra Tevarin y todo eso. Y ven como una posibilidad, ¿no? Como algo que les da prestigio y que los integraría mejor en la sociedad y darles mejor posición dentro de la sociedad de la UE.
Things in the current election cycle we're dealing with is some of the candidates and their preference to wanting to encourage more Tavaran to join the armed forces and stuff like that as a way to kind of like make for give them more opportunities and kind of a more diverse fighting force for the UEE. So there's definitely a lot out there, but I'm sure there's still plenty of Tavaran that have no interest in joining or just don't see the use in it. So I think it's more of a personal choice.
Yeah, there's a sort of, I mean, there's an interesting split kind of going on within the Tavaran.
Que dice que no es algo que simplemente todos los Tevarin se tengan que unir nada, sino que es más bien una opción personal y que se están desarrollando, que se fomente de alguna manera para que de que participen en alguna empresa, alguna hazaña o en misiones, ¿no? Para la web, pero que es una decisión personal de los Tevarin. Y estaba comentando ahora David que hay como dos movimientos de los Tevarin. De hecho hay unos movimientos ahora que va a contar, supongo que es un movimiento un poco separatista y otro movimiento que sería pues ya de integración, ¿no?
Where there's a certain percentage of them are believing that they, you know, are trying to kind of rediscover their old ways, and that I can't remember, I think they went to Branagh or Bremen.
Yes,
Branagh. And so they've kind of formed this, or trying to kind of go and isolate themselves and kind of start to resurrect kind of the old Tavaran.
Que dice que hay como un grupo que se fue a Brana que trata como de recobrar la vieja cultura de los Tevarin y tal.
Rajora and stuff, and then there's another group that sort of Suj Kasi, who's the Tavaran senator, is sort of spearheading of like, you know, we need to, you know, play our part. We're part of this empire. Let's act like it. Type.
Claro, luego está la parte del senador que que están con el senador, ¿no? Que sería en plan de nosotros somos parte de este imperio, vamos a jugar lo que nos toca, vamos a jugar nuestro papel dentro del imperio, ¿no?
Thing and really trying to inspire the Tavaran to really kind of take up their mantle as members of the UEE and really do their part. And then there's the third who kind of ignore both and are just sort of like still somewhat disaffected and don't want to contribute at all.
Y luego hay otra tercera parte de Barings que simplemente van a su rollo, pasan de todo y no les interesa contribuir en nada.
Yeah, I think the Tavaran serving in the Navy was a big step forward for them in terms of finding their place within the empire, because there was a lot of distrust at the beginning. You know, we were at war with them, they were living among us, they were kind of segregated. And so that opportunity, when it occurred, when they made the invitation to allow Tavaran to serve, was kind of the first normalizing step for a lot of ways of humanity kind of getting the used to idea that maybe we can trust these people. So
Claro, dice que uno de los primeros pasos después de la guerra Tebarin, que bueno, que los separaron, se segregaron de alguna manera y que fueron tiempos duros, tiempos de estrés, pero que el primer paso para su integración que fue quizás el tema de que se unieran a los militares para que de alguna manera pues fuera un indicativo de que la humanidad podía empezar a confiar en este pueblo, ¿no? En esta gente, en los Tebarin.
It's kind of interesting in the historical significance of it, and it still goes on today. I think, you know, Tavaran have a reputation for being fierce warriors. So,
Además de los Tebarin tienen una reputación de ser guerreros que no tienen miedo, ¿no?
Shedding. No, I made that one up. This person has clearly done their homework. So I'm not gonna alter this one. I'm gonna read it just as it is. Humanity made first contact with the Banu in Davian, which is at least 5 jumps from Banu territory according to the star map. The Banu in question was not an explorer but a fugitive, which implies that he knew of those systems already, which in turn implies that other Banu knew about them. In fact, we know they must have, because of Treese, which lies clear across the star map from known Banu space, at least 8 jumps by my count, and to make the trip in 8 jumps from Geddon would mean going through Terra. In any case, Treese is a long way from Banu space, and what's between the two is mostly UEE space or what's become UEE space. So the question is, if the Banu knew about all these uninhabited systems for so long, why didn't they colonize any of them?
I gotta answer.
Wow. Bueno, dice que cuando nos encontramos con los Banu y demás, saltaron como a 5 sistemas de la tierra Banu, de territorio Banu, y que hay como zonas sin colonizar de los Vanus. Si los Vanus sabían de la existencia de esos sistemas, ¿por qué no los colonizaron primero? Porque son territorio de la UE. Entonces, ¿por qué es esto, no?
Answer this. Any Banu who knows the answer is dead, so we'll never know. The end.
Cualquiera que sepa la respuesta está muerta, así que nunca lo sabremos.
For folks who might not know what the context of that answer is, Sherry, why does knowledge die with the Banu?
So Banu don't really preserve historical records that out.
Ah, claro, es verdad. Los Banu no tienen un récord histórico de sus movidas. Entonces, cualquier cosa que haya pasado o la historia que haya ocurrido en esos momentos no se sabe.
Line like big events that happen. It's not out of any kind of like malice for past events. It's just because it's not useful for them to remember stuff like that. You know, like their culture is centered around the present moment, like making things that have use, like tools and instructional guides. So
Claro, dicen que ellos utilizan, o sea, no valoran el conocimiento del pasado, sino que solo valoran las cosas que sean útiles como herramientas o guías de instrumentación y demás. No les importa ese tipo de cosas, ¿no? Porque no son herramientas que consideren útiles.
Yeah, they preserve knowledge.
They preserve knowledge. They don't preserve history.
Claro, ellos preservan, o sea, sí que preservan el conocimiento, pero no la historia.
So, them recording a reason like why didn't the Banu terraform this random system? No Banu would care enough to write that down.
Claro, ¿por qué alguien no decidió no terraformar este planeta? A ningún humano le importaría lo suficiente como para escribirlo.
And it's kind of like, you know, the humans existing in the UE now, like they've kind of noticed this discrepancy, wondered themselves, and tried to figure it out. And it's one thing that it's hard to get travel information from the Banu the way that we've kind of talked about them setting up their navigational, is that it's very proprietary and controlled. And so like we didn't instantly get access to all the Banu star maps when we became friends with them. It's been a long overtime trading process of finally gaining access. Like you have to purchase rights to get their star map data. And
Claro, dice que a la hora de poder, que aparte de eso, no sabemos, no tenemos registro de los viajes de los vanos, porque dice que para nosotros poder tener acceso a su mapa de estrellas, que es en plan algo que no fue así dado de primeras y que son muy reservados con respecto a compartir ese tipo de conocimiento y que como que tienes que comprar, como que han tenido que comprar a lo largo de pues largas charlas, las conversaciones que han tenido que como que comprar ese acceso a ciertas partes del mapa de las estrellas que ellos poseen.
And a lot of them are very carefully held because people want to control trade routes. They don't want the humans coming in and, doing these things. And so it's not like we can just take a Banu ship and download the information because of the way that they build their drives. It's all hard coded into it and you can't remove it out. And so it's kind of an interesting thing where they're...
Claro, y además dice que la forma, que tampoco es tan sencillo como llegar a una nave Vanu y descargar su contenido, su información, porque tienen como codificados los discos, ¿no?, de información.
Very protective of that information.
Que son muy
Sort of
protectores de esa información, sobre todo por el tema de las rutas de comercio que establecen y demás.
The question from earlier about how you differentiate the alien races when they're when on a surface level they're all bipedal.
Y aquí, antes de que se me olvide, voy a comentar una cosa para quien no lo sepa. Sobre cerca de los mapas, ¿vale? Cerca de los mapas, en la página oficial de Star Citizen, ¿ok? Aquí estamos, la página oficial de Star Citizen. Si nos vamos a la Pledge Store y nos vamos a Extras y nos vamos a Add-ons, Game Universe Map, More Info. Necesitas evitar a los Vandul mientras estás tratando con los Xian. ¿Quieres saber las mejores rutas para contrabandear desde Shish hasta la Tierra? Entonces necesitarás este encantador mapa a todo color del mundo de Star Citizen, el cual pondrá todos los sistemas conocidos y sus puntos de salto, así como información de sus recursos, alianzas y más. $5. Digital Star Map, que yo tengo, por supuesto. Así es. Chan, 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 chan. Os voy a pasar el enlace para que lo tengáis, porque... no, simplemente es algo que se pilla, lo tienes en el hangar y listo, ¿vale? No hay posibilidad de enseñar nada. De momento no está desarrollado, pero bueno, que sepáis que eso está ahí. Vamos a seguir.
You find ways of differentiating through their culture and through their habits and stuff like that. So the Banu don't care about history.
It is a mystery.
Let's see. How do you work to adapt or limit the lore you write into something that will become possible to actually create in the game?
¿Cómo hacéis para crear un límite a la hora de trabajar en el lore, no?
We do our best.
Hacemos lo mejor que podemos.
Yeah, conversations. I was going to say good communication.
Yeah.
Buena
Where
conversación.
we brainstorm,
We brainstorm a lot. We also, like, if it seems like stuff's going to have like gameplay implications, we will try to either get really cryptic in the stuff that we're talking about that's actually directly referencing gameplay, or and as well as just reach out to the design team, directors and stuff like that, and just say like, hey, is this roughly accurate? Is this completely flying in the face of everything that we're heading towards? Like,
dice que hablan con directores y demás y dicen, bueno, esto que estamos creando es acertado o realmente se está saliendo totalmente del margen.
We try to get buy-in basically from the other team members before writing anything.
Claro, antes de avanzar con nada, pues hablan con otros miembros del equipo y van con comunicación, tratan de acotar lo que son los límites de la locura de escribir la narrativa, ¿no?
Because the last thing we want to do is say, like, throw out something arbitrarily that has massive gameplay implications, and then have to walk it back because, people read our stuff pretty closely.
Yes. Oh, that last question evidenced enough. A follow-up to the Banu question from the chat: if Banu don't savor history, they don't write down history or anything. Can there be Banu outlaws? Can you have a Banu with a criminal record?
Si los Vanu no estudian su historia, puede haber un Vanu con un historial criminal.
Yes, because it's still based off of, like, if I'm a Banu and I steal from Banu Will remembers that I stole from him, and so there's.
I would hire a security company to collect, track down Dave, and that contract, as long as it's in existence, would mark Dave as a wanted person. But how far that knowledge spreads, maybe it's kind of a personal, immediate kind of transgression.
Yeah, it feels like the Banu, there's less of that next step with the Banu, as in that doesn't just become a general, you are now an outlaw for everyone. It's a very personal thing at that moment, and if Will disappears or dies, that Dave may no longer be considered an outlaw because no one really cares. It's not useful to anybody else to go track him down because that whatever happened there has no significance.
The contract.
Me dice que a la hora de haber un criminal, que en realidad si alguien le roba a otro Vanu, si otro Vanu le roba a otro Vanu, que sería como una rencilla personal, sería algo más personal y que el propio Vanu se encargaría, contrataría a una seguridad y demás, porque a nadie más le importaría, ¿no? Solo a la persona que ha sido robada.
Will's contract with his mercs that he hired to kill me would be annulled because Will's dead. So it's sort of, as we've talked about in the past,
Gracias por el follow.
The kind of inherent comedy around the humans in Banu having to constantly renegotiate their trade agreement. Because,
Good job. You passed.
¿Es el mismo Digital Star Map que viene en algunos packs? Sí, Rojiri, es el mismo. Pero no todos vienen. Yo, por ejemplo, no lo tengo. Quiero recordar que no lo tengo. Vamos a revisar. Pero sí que es algo importante revisar. Incluso lo debería tener con el paquete de exploración, que sería tocho. Pero no sale. Solo sé, yo creo que con algunos packs del principio. ¿Lo veis? Aquí está. Tenemos juego en 42, Star Citizen Digital Download, Lifetime Insurance y Starting Money. Pero no está el Digital Map. Pero en algunas versiones sí que había venido, ¿vale? Algunas versiones de tal, pero son paquetes muy al principio. Muy al principio del todo.
Let's talk about the Xi'an. How did the Xi'an develop? This person read that they weren't at the top of the food chain. Is the race that is the top of their food chain still around? That's really two questions. How did the Xi'an develop, and then
¿Cómo los Xi'an se han desarrollado y si la criatura alfa, el predador alfa, sigue por ahí dando vueltas en su mundo?
is the whatever the race that was at the top, the species that was at the top?
We got what, 30,000 years of history? So
Yeah,
how much time?
Yeah, we got a very long time. So, like, I personally have always imagined that the Xi'an were not self-aware. Well, they were prey animals. Like, they maybe in their like early days when they were starting to develop tools, the predator animals that used to hunt them down and kill them all the time were around, and so that's part of the reason why they developed tools and banded together in groups. Like this active predation helped them develop as an actual civilization. And so I also like to imagine that once they banded together and had tools to get rid of their predator species, they just got rid of them. Like I don't believe that at that time the predator species were self-aware like the Xi'an were.
Right?
Yeah, I would also think the long.
Vale, está comentando que sí, que al principio esa criatura, digamos, el predador alfa, que sí que ayudó a desarrollar, al principio cuando los Xi'an no tenían herramientas, pero luego pues ya se convirtieron, o sea, los reventaron, ¿no? Digamos, o sea, ya no tenían problemas con ese tipo de criaturas, o sea que
long lifespan of a Xi'an would probably benefit them because there's so much knowledge that they can acquire and then kind of grow over the few hundred years they're living. So yeah, I could see them very quickly assessing and understanding the the apex predators around them and how to either avoid them or overcome them.
I could see them having them like still around as like a zoo type thing of showing like how far we came. Like we're not afraid of this.
Claro, dice Will que sí, que puede ver cómo ellos sigue estando por ahí la criatura, en plan de ya no nos molesta, mira cuán lejos hemos llegado y lo que al principio pues era un problema, pues ahora ya no nos afecta para nada, ¿no? Refiriéndose del punto de vista de los Xian a la criatura.
Elephant, tiger, bat anymore. That's
They
not
live in the
canon.
Avatar universe.
Yeah, like they actually have them on the zoo planet.
The zoo, yeah.
Keep them in the preserve.
Yeah, I mean, we have the Santokyai. That's a super scary creature that used to drop down from the trees and kill the heck out of Xian.
Tenemos la Xantokiai, que era una criatura que solía estar en los árboles y saltar de los árboles y cargarse a los Xian.
I got still around.
Yeah, and they named a ship after him.
Y que
Yeah.
nombraron una nave
Like,
que se
just
llama
be like,
Santokiai,
aha,
de
now
esa
we
criatura.
control the Santokyai. Suck it. Don't know why.
I yield my time.
I yield my time.
Yeah, maybe that would be like the real baller like Xi'an move is to have, one of those on your compound as a pet.
Buenas, Miguel.
Kind of running around with a
yeah.
fancy collar, yeah.
The sort of
Like
Xi'an
Pablo
Scarface.
Escobar having hippos and tigers and
Let's
Tiger Emperor.
let's move along.
Oh, okay.
How did humans learn to communicate with the Banu they met during first contact?
¿Cómo los humanos aprendieron a comunicarse con los Vanu que se encontraron en el primer contacto?
It was a really long process. It was, I think it was Neil Sikolovich was the general in charge, but it was several months of them working with.
Que fue con el general Lilian Sikolovich o algo así, o Sikolovich, algo dicho así. Que fue como un mes entero, que llevó bastante tiempo poder comunicarse con los Vanu.
The Banu. Banu or Xi'an?
Which was the one for first contact? Banu, right?
Banu.
Banu, yeah.
Banu.
Okay. But it was a very long, weird, arduous process. But yeah.
Many xenolinguists gave up their lives to deliver this information.
Yeah.
Is there a character in our lore named after Britain?
Not yet. I do
in
want
my
to
heart.
cast him as like the if we have like a in-lore language tutor, sort of like a Rosetta Stone instructor would be my goal.
The Britain Stone?
Yeah.
Están hablando de algo que no entiendo nada, si hay un Doctor Brie o algo así, para descubrir el idioma no entiendo de qué va, debe ser alguna referencia, alguna peli, serie o libro, no tengo ni idea.
Basically, unless he has a preference of what he would like to appear as, but that would be my.
For those who maybe don't know and just heard a name come out of nowhere and you're like, who? Britton Watkins is our official xenolinguist.
Vale, Britton Manwalkish, o como se llamaba el tío, que es su xenolingüista oficial. Por eso decían si tendrían a alguien para interpretar ese rollo, ¿no? Por eso lo mencionaba.
For Star Citizen. And the
I
creator
recommend
of-
watching his how to speak Xi'an videos that
Yes.
he did
Yeah.
for us.
He
They're
also
very
actually has
good.
a documentary too on constructed language.
It's awesome.
Speaking of language, some games allow for player characters to slowly learn alien languages, to find ruins faster and understand artifacts for better rewards, ship items, etc. With the growing library of languages for the Vandal, the Xi'an, and the Banu, what are your plans for integrating these languages into the game?
Dice que algunos juegos, aprendiendo lenguajes alien y demás, pues tienes o más recompensas o poder hacer a contenido más rápido, como ruinas o demás. ¿Cuáles son vuestros planes para introducir el lenguaje, estos lenguajes, ¿no? El lenguaje Banu, Xi'an de Varin en el juego?
I mean, as outside of like just sort of pure environmental stuff. I mean, we started to kind of we have started integrating them in. Like, I believe we have Banu stuff on some of the food vendor carts and stuff like that.
No, we have Banu and Xi'an signage and.
Area 18 has a bunch.
Yes, I was like, oh god, are they up yet?
Claro, ahora tenemos cartelería Xi'an y Banu en Área 18, que como que están puestos de esa manera.
But yeah, I mean, again, I think it's the way we'd always been kind of talking about it. Again, like we'll see, as they come more online. I believe the early conversations was always like, if you take the time to learn this stuff, that it will, open up some possibilities and kind of facilitate some kind of cool stuff, and you might get to kind of navigate some social minefields that other people might fall into because they're not familiar with the language. But it was also trying to balance it, because we don't want to be punishing to people who don't have time to learn an alien language. Like, that seems kind of unfair to me, because I'm terrible.
Dice que tiene que ser algo como balanceado, que sí que evidentemente te puedes enterar de corrientes sociales o cosas que ocurren sabiendo los lenguajes alien, pero que no quieren tampoco privar a la gente que no tenga tiempo para conocer esos idiomas de ciertas cosas.
I barely speak English.
Sería como castigar, ¿no?
So it's like,
Para dar tiempo para jugar.
making it fun for the people and rewarding them for learning Xi'an, which is impressive, but not being too crushing to people who haven't, or make the game unplayable to people who haven't.
Claro, sí, hacer recompensas para gente que se aprende el lenguaje Xi'an, lo cual sería impresionante, pero no llegar al punto de hacerlo injugable para personas que no sepan el idioma.
I could see a mission that doesn't require you to have to read Banu to complete it, but a secondary objective, like an optional objective that would benefit you more if you could.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
Or like you can read the signs on the ruins and it'll take you down a different path or something like that. That still leads to the same place, but maybe you get quicker or something. I don't know.
Yeah, we also have to figure out how kind of our 30th century tech ties into this, because we're talking about how your mobiGlas kind of AR ties into the world around you and what information you're going to be getting for identifying stuff, and whether, like, our whole idea is that if we do end up having automatic translation happening through your mobiGlas, that it's rough. Like, it is the bare bones, like
70% accurate type thing.
Trying to do a translation online in like 1999 kind of level of translation.
Maybe it just translates the words in the order that they're written, but since it doesn't translate the grammar, it's like
you're missing out.
Big.
You're missing out on the nuance, which might give you a leg up.
We haven't.
Están hablando de la posibilidad de que, por ejemplo, vayas con el movilidad y realmente pues te traduzca lo que sería ciertas partes de lo que estamos leyendo de los Xi'an, ¿no? Que sería, pues en el 2900 porque tendría sentido poder hacer algo así, pero que te traduzca de una manera un poco más cruda, ¿no? Que no te traduzca tal cual las frases, en plan, pues que te ponga caja, grande o algo así, ¿no? A la hora de hacer una misión o tal, pues que recibas información de los puntos de interés o cosillas de interés a través del mobiGlas.
Talked with the design team yet about the idea that there would be a skill that you could acquire where it's like, I know Banu now, and it like translates it differently or something like that. That's kind of I don't know where we would fall on that.
Y que dice que estuvieron hablando con el equipo de desarrollo en plan de que hubiera una especie de habilidad de que ahora conoces a los Vanu, ¿no? Por reputaciones o tal, y que ahora pues puedo traducir las cosas de los Vanu de otra manera, o podría ser una de las direcciones que se pueden tomar, pero no hay nada claro al respecto todavía.
So,
I want to make sure that folks heard the part we have not talked to design about that. just before.
Vamos a hacer claro a los colegas de que no hemos hablado con la gente de diseño a través de esto todavía, ¿no? Que yo solo para quedar claro que la gente no se vuelva loca.
We could just be flashing
The various summaries that come.
This is all speculation. These are all cool ideas.
You don't have like a pop-up, Jared? You could just hit like a Chiron that just sort of like flashes of like have not talked to design, that just kind of.
We are not describing actual gameplay.
Dice que se podrían tener diciendo a la Jared que se podría poner como flashes en la pantalla diciendo no estamos descubriendo gameplay, no, o sea, estamos simplemente haciendo ideas, especulando, ¿no?
There's so many things I'd like to say right now. Sometimes my life is not my own. Let's see. Is there anything you can tell us about our beloved Jerry? Hey, a question about Jerry, the Banu involved in First Contact. Come on, we have some deep-seated backstory for Jerry, don't we?
Deep love for Jerry. No, actually, we don't. I mean, just outside of the fact that he was on the run from some Banu. That's why he came across Vernon Tar. But yeah, I don't think
Salió
we really delved too deep.
Interesante.
It's definitely a good short story candidate, maybe for something for us fun
Banu
to do in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah, as we've been further developing the Banu species in general, I think it's helped kind of bring a few more specifics. So now that we've kind of honed that in a little bit, it might be a good time to revisit and provide a little more color to his journey and a little more context.
You should be like a con artist trying to sell fake alien relics for an alien species that doesn't exist.
Yeah, it sort of seems like that would probably not be too far from the truth. That he would be doing something. Yeah, he was selling fake, ship reg tags or something like that, or timeshares in Boca.
Timeshare and Pyro, or Null, something like that. Cathcart Cuisinarts. We heard that the Banu trade with even the Van Duel. How did that come about?
Hemos escuchado que los Banu incluso tradean con los Bandul. ¿De dónde salió
Does
todo
anybody
esto?
remember?
Great questions.
It's one of those proprietary information things where they don't want us to necessarily also have trade with the Van Duel.
Eso es algo información propietaria de los Bandul que no quieren compartir con nosotros para que también, o sea, no nos quieren tradeando también con los Bandul.
Where if it's a money revenue stream that they have complete control over now, so they're not exactly breaking it down. They're also not exactly advertising it. It's more just kind of like inferred from the fact that, maybe you'll see a Banu selling Vandal made items and you're like, how did you get those? And he's like, I got them.
They gave them to me for money.
You got them from Jerry.
So we do know from context that they are perceivably have some kind of connection with them, but it's unclear to what extent or how they did it.
Dice que sabemos que hay información de que tendría contacto con los Bandul, pero no sabemos de qué manera lo han hecho.
Is there anything you can share about the native species of the Hades system?
¿Hay alguna información que podréis compartir acerca de las especies nativas del sistema Hades?
They're dead.
They are dead.
Están muertos.
Do you want to give some back context to what this person's referring to?
They died.
Sure.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, the Hades system is basically it's kind of a totally wrecked system. There's a planet that's been cracked in half. It's basically the only thing that humanity sort of learned about it was like somebody used to live here a while ago and they messed each other up pretty bad to the point where they basically presumably wiped themselves out.
Dice que lo que se sabe del sistema Hades es que fueron contra ellos mismos tan mal que al final acabaron reventando el planeta. O sea, se acabaron reventando. Está partido por la mitad y todo.
We've all had that roommate.
Yeah.
Some of us still do.
Are you talking about Toast?
No.
Wow. He's got a sword, Jared.
And he watches the show. Hi, Toast. We'll just move on. Do the Tavarans speak their own language, or do they now speak human? Or
Common
languages? Common
UE
languages.
standard.
Well, it depends on where you are in the universe. There are some Tavaran enclaves outside of the UEE that would certainly still preserve the language, but most of the Tavaran that were absorbed in the UEE, when they got rid of their culture, they most likely threw away their language too. They're just like, this is shit. This didn't serve us well. None of this protected us when it counts. So why should we still bother to use it?
Claro, dice que al final el idioma Tevarin, que quedan algunos Tevarin que sí que utilizaban el idioma, pero que es en plan que cuando pasó todo el tema de las guerras Tevarin y demás y fueron absorbidos por la UE, que como que repudiaban toda la cultura Tevarin y tal, y todos los idiomas, todo el idioma, porque que no les servía, no nos ha protegido esto en el pasado, ¿no? Como que se deshicieron de ella, ¿no? Del idioma.
I mean, again, I don't know. I mean, I think it might be one of those things that once we get the language kind of online, we kind of figure it out. Because at the same time, like definitely that they were like, screw Rajora, it was useless, it was stuff, but it still feels like to me that there'd be still patches of like the language is still kind of survived because that was just their way of communication.
It's out there.
Yeah, definitely in
out
Branagh. Yeah.
Definitely in Branagh, like probably the more like you said, the ones who were trying to resurrect kind of the old Tavaran ways would probably adhere more to it, but
I think there's definitely been...
Sí, quizás la parte de los Tevarin que estaban resucitando más son las antiguas culturas, que quizás podemos escuchar algo del idioma a través de ellos.
renewed interest in recent time. Sorry, Adam, go for it.
Oh yeah, no, I was just. It's been like 300 plus years since the end of the the Second Tavaran War and the species officially being integrated into the UEE. So that's in that amount of time, you can see the language has probably dropped off a lot, but it's still not so old that it's not like Latin where it's completely lost. There are still probably people that have been speaking it and keeping it alive. And yeah, I believe there is a bit of a resurgence right now, at least in the game world.
One thing that would be really fun, once we start kind of tackling the language itself, would be to have the kind of similar what you said with Latin, like that it's patchwork integrated into sort of human common, that you might get words that carry over. They might still speak kind of a dialect of it that's a bit more kind of integrated to kind of, so the language of the Tavaran is more an assimilated UEE standard old Tavaran, and then you have the purists who are back to Rajor speaking pure Tavaran, which is...
Me dice que puede pasar algo como el latín y los idiomas del castellano, el francés y demás, que como que hay, a la hora de integrarse a la web, que puede que hayan quedado remanentes o palabras también del idioma tevarin, pero que sea mucho menos puro que lo que sería el antiguo tevarin, ¿no?
Like the broken one, but a little bit more kind of refrained, but just to give it that sort of sense of like even their language is sort of assimilating into English or the UE standard based on
with the big rejection in that whole period of time. I think there's a large population of the Tavaran who only speak UE standard, like that's it, that's their language. And now you start getting people maybe who grew up only speaking standard who are like, I would like to connect more with my past. I'm going to take a class to try to learn how to speak Tavaran again. And to Adam's point, it's real interesting because this isn't like a lost language like we've encountered where we don't understand ancient Greek, because we have recordings, like we encountered them in a digital age. So there's like well documentation on this language.
And even though they did purge their culture after the Second Tavaran War and tried to clear a lot of that out, there still be a digital record, and the Kabul system was recently discovered, which a bunch of ancient Tavaran artifacts there. So that's always a well we can go to and say, like the language or things that might have been lost have been refound here.
Yeah, and from a linguistics perspective, 600 years is a very long time. Like, we don't speak the same language. Like, we speak English right now, us here, but English 600 years ago did not sound like this. Yeah. So, like, the Tavaran that exists now, even if there was an unbroken chain from the Tavaran...
Está comentando un poco que, claro, que ahora todos los que están ahí hablan inglés, pero 600 años son muchos años, y que el inglés de 600 años no era el mismo inglés que ellos están hablando ahora. Que con el paso del tiempo el idioma también se modificaría, ¿no?
Por sota. The drotte marchet bäst till rotten, bara every vein swish the kur, which vertun. Anyway, come back.
Well, and I've seen the conversation on Spectrum about people being like, well, in 29, 50, humans would not be sounding anything like we like. Right. Our writing is pretty present. We have chosen not to do, like some authors do that really cool thing where they create, almost an entirely new language to show how different it's come over the hundreds of years. And that's probably, that might be more accurate, but we definitely, have gone for more of a stylized version of the future. Yeah. So, because I know
similar to like the stylistic choice of like the no AI thing. Like, it was sort of a choice to make it not that sort of very, unusual sounding English language, to keep it conversational, so it still sounds grounded and real to us as players, rather than trying to accurately depict or predict what English will evolve to, or various languages will evolve to in 900 years, which I do not have the brain capacity for.
Yeah, like
dice que el tipo que no tiene el aliento para tratar de desarrollar cómo sería el inglés que se hablaría en 900 años en adelante, tratar de imaginar eso, que no que vamos a tratar de mantener eso como en plan rollo al alcance de la gente, no nos vamos a volver locos, ¿no?
Like when you're watching a movie and everyone's Russian and you're like, why are they speaking with British accents? It's one of those suspension of disbeliefs in order to be able to tell the story. Right. So,
I kind of following up on that. The question is do you plan to flesh out multiple religions for each race similar to as humans? I want to tweak that a bit. How do you not go down the rabbit hole? Like, how do you know how far you're supposed to go with this stuff before you're like, all right, this isn't the core central thing of the entire game here. It's, come back. I've got a lot of other things to do. How do you manage not just falling down the rabbit hole in any of these one things?
Claro, dice todo, está diciendo ahí, leyendo la pregunta de cómo serán las religiones o tendrán que desarrollar las religiones, las demás razas, como ha tenido la humanidad. Y Discolanda reformula la pregunta en plan diciendo de cómo hacéis para volver a la realidad, para volver al juego. Recordad que esto es un juego y no salir otra vez del margen. ¿Cómo hacéis esto, no?
Who says we ever left the rabbit hole?
Wow. It's a lot of it comes from need. Like, maybe we start with the base supposition of, like, they have a lot of religions. Like with the Banu, we said they're going to have a lot of different belief systems that they try to incorporate in. And that's enough for us to start going on. And then we start filling that in as we need it. So talking about, like, the god of luck is a very important one. And so we've learned a little bit more about how that works. Or we decide that they're a little more monotheistic and, like, like the Tavaran had this major belief that was instilled as part of their culture. And that's kind of surmounted, like, it was part of their identity, and so that focused it in. So I think it's usually like that. Like, we can say, like, even for the human stuff, like, there's a bunch of sports. Like, humans play a bunch of different sports, but we talked about Sadaball. Like, it's just, we just have to pick and choose our battles, and a lot of times it's that need. I'm writing this.
Vale, dice que a la hora de que se genera como una especie de necesidad. Por ejemplo, los Vanu tienen diferentes creencias o tratan de incorporar esas diferentes creencias que tienen y tal, pero se vuelve una necesidad también incorporar algunas. O los Tevarin, que tienen muy arraigado el tema tenían muy arraigado el tema de la religión, en forma de vivir y demás, y que era como su forma de vida, el tema de la guerra y todo eso. Pero que pasa un poco como, por ejemplo, con los humanos. Los humanos tienen muchos tipos de deportes distintos, pero simplemente pues solo hablamos de unos pocos. O sea, tenemos que escoger nuestras batallas, dice, ¿no?
Thing right now, and I need more detail about this, so I'm going to dive into it, because otherwise you'll just go crazy. You can just sit forever thinking of bands for hundreds of years, and like.
Yeah. And I think it's also one of those things. I always kind of try to equate a lot of this.
No, porque de otra manera, si nos cogemos batallas, pues podría ser una conversación eterna, ¿no? Podrían estar ahí sentados durante horas y horas tratando de desarrollar 600 años de historia.
To drawing a picture where you draw in the sort of like block shapes to block out your composition and your sizes and your framing and stuff like that, and then you fill in the details as you go, and you refine down
as you need it.
As opposed to, like, starting really detailed and trying to do a picture, it'll take you forever. It's like you kind of get what you need to get you through and sell what you're trying to sell, as far as a flavor or a location or something like that. And, and then just kind of move forward, because again, there's so much stuff to cover that, like, hopefully as we are moving down, we're still filling in all these little, getting specific on stuff, because we go, oh, we need a new, Tavaran. I don't want, I have this Banu, and I don't want him to worship Terranin, so I want him to do a new god. So I got to come up with a new god. I don't know what the hell that was, but that's it. So now we have a second one that we can swap.
Sí, es decir, que a veces salen con una movida y tienen que desarrollar esa movida y dices en plan, bueno, vamos a desarrollar un nuevo dios para los Vanu o algo así. Bueno, pues lo hacemos y ya está, pero que es algo que como que va surgiendo y que van de poco a poco, lo que comentas. Está comentando un poco lo mismo, ¿no?
Where you're walking and where you go, you can fill in a lot of detail on that path, so that your character goes to this one bar and has this one drink, and you can describe the full history of that. But with us covering, anyone can do so many different things, it becomes a lot harder to have that kind of control and level of detail. So, like, Dave's analogy was great for that kind of high level, rough sketch, and then filling it in the details as well.
Claro, dice que tú, por ejemplo, podrías pillar lo que sería un personaje, decir que va a un bar y que va a beber esa bebida de bar, y puedes contar toda la historia de dónde viene esa bebida, de lo que es el bar, de tal. Y podrías centrarte en desarrollar esa historia, pero que contarlo, o sea, tratar de contar las diferentes historias que pueden ocurrir con todo detalle y todo lo que ocurre en ellas, pues que sería un poco caótico, una locura, ¿no? Entonces, que esa es una manera de trabajar, por ejemplo.
Yes.
Okay.
1, 2.
Let me see what else I got. Do I really have the Canterbury Tales memorized in the Old English? Yes. And because I make bad bets. See, not shaving until 3.0 comes out. When I commit, people. How developed are the developing species, such as the Asoans? So we talked about them a little earlier. Will we have cities? Will they have cities and forms of transportation, or how developed is developing?
I mean,
¿Cómo desarrollado está el desarrollo de otras especies? ¿Tendrán ciudades o cómo se
again, originally the idea was that it was anything kind of below spacefaring. That the idea that the Fair Chance Act was, everyone is going to, all the cultures are going to leave this species alone until they basically take off and get into space, and then they'll be basically met by, some vandal, a kid. And then they can be sort of integrated into the galaxy as a spacefaring species. But now that we're sort of able to do full planetary exploration, which again, back in 2020.
Claro, dice que la idea era que había un acuerdo de que todas las especies se iban a dejar aparte y demás, y que iban a estar ahí, que hasta que se pudieran evolucionar lo suficiente para volar por su cuenta al espacio, y luego añadirse las especies de la UE. Pero ahora que podemos hacer exploración planetaria completa.
12 was a dream. I think we're probably going to shave it down. I don't know. It's an interesting question. It feels like it's easier to make them not as developed technologically, so it's easier to just make a world, and then it's just a type of creature that's sort of running around on the surface of the world, rather than like having to develop architecture or vehicles or stuff like that. It's like they were in the 1800s or equivalent of our 1800s type thing. So I don't know. It's going to be an interesting question.
The fair chance that...
Que va a ser una cuestión interesante, ¿no? Porque el tema de que ahora se puede, pues simplemente pueden hacer un planeta y pueden poner a gente por allí viviendo por encima y tal, o a cosas viviendo por allí por encima. Pero claro, lo que podemos hacer a los planetas y todo, pues como que impedir allí es que yo lo pienso, ¿no? Impedir a los jugadores que vayan a un planeta que supuestamente no se puede intervenir. O sea, ¿cuánto va a durar eso?
The act overall is very interesting to me, because I don't think not everyone agrees with it. Like, there's some people who think it's mean not to lift up a developing species. If we have like medicine and they're suffering from a disease, is it really right that we don't help them? So like that's one of the science fiction kind of stories that I'm really fascinated by, and I hope we get a chance.
Dice que una de las cosas que tiene interés en hacer es, por ejemplo, si están sufriendo y nosotros les podemos proporcionar las medicinas, nos las podemos ofrecer, o sea, los dejaremos a su suerte. Es una de las cuestiones que le parece interesante narrar.
To explore that more as we go.
Yeah, there are a few developing species in the Genesis system. There's a group of cephalopod-like species who are just beginning to explore the surface of their world, and they have engaged in warfare with a land-dwelling species who doesn't like them. And the people who are observing are like, ethically, should we interfere in this? Because there's a good chance that one could wipe the other out. And does that violate the tenets of the Fair Chance Act on its own? Because it's a very murky issue. Lots of interesting perspectives.
You're in the UE Senate. Bill comes up to eradicate the Fair Chance Act. Do you vote to keep it or get rid of it?
I would keep it.
Si hubiera una oportunidad de votar, la oportunidad justa de votar que se le quitara o se pusiera, ¿qué votaría? Si se pudiera mantener o quitarla. Dijeron que la quedaría con ella.
Will?
Man, I would modify it.
La modificaría.
Just
la modificaría.
Basically, I would acknowledge that these are claimed planets that we don't have a right to, but I would probably push for opening contact with these species.
All right, but the bill up for vote is just to abolish it, not to amend it. Do you keep it or do you abolish it? Is abolishing it the next step to changing it?
No, I would keep it until I can introduce a new law.
Okay. Adam?
I would keep it.
All right.
Personally, yeah. But I would point out the Fair Chance Act, doesn't just apply to developing species. It can also affect like mining rights to certain areas and stuff like that. So
dice que puede ser derechos mineros y tal y demás historias. O sea, yo os voy a hacerle una pregunta en el chat. O sea, vosotros aboliríais la Prime Directive, o sea, la ley de no intervención hasta que hasta que la especie estuviera lo suficientemente desarrollada, o sea, hasta que pudiera ir al espacio. O mantendríais esa ley o la quitaríais. Yo personalmente, es que es complicado, ¿eh? Pero es que yo la quitaba, ¿eh? Yo la quitaba la ley. O sea, luego derechos mineros y tal y tal, pero claro, o sea, durante ese proceso de quitarla o de introducirse una especie habría que tener una serie de movidas o de tal. Eh, o sea, no dar acceso a la tecnología o ayudar a desarrollar su propia tecnología, pero la mantendría con graciosas consecuencias, no lo sé. Yo la quitaba. Yo la quitaba, yo creo.
Yeah, if a species is developing, they don't want people up in the asteroid belt or going down to the planet to pull out these valuable resources and potentially mess with any of the species there. So there's even one candidate in the current final five of the Imperator election, Paul LaSalle, who one of his core campaign promises is to basically revisit.
¿No te molaría que te confundieran con una deidad? No, en realidad, o sea, es que el conocimiento hay que compartirlo y eso se aplica para todo. O sea, ¿qué necesidad hay de no compartir ese conocimiento? Ese es el punto, ¿no? Si el conocimiento tiene que ser para compartir. O sea, el mantener esa ley, estás partiendo de la base de que tu sociedad lo que quiere es aprovecharse de. Y eso es un pensamiento igual chungo, ¿no? O sea, jodido, en plan de, hostia, tío. O sea, de dar la bienvenida a una especie nueva y bueno, pues tratar de hacer relaciones y ver cómo va la cosa y a partir de ahí tomar una decisión. O sea, darles la oportunidad a ellos de decidir si quieren o no, ¿no? En ese sentido. O sea, no imponer, decir, no, mira, no vamos a intervenir nada, no, sino bajar hasta allí y decir, tenéis la oportunidad de uniros ahora o de evolucionar por vuestra cuenta. En ese sentido, creo que se debería hacer, ¿no?
The Fair Chance Act as a way to open it up for minors to be able to maybe use new technologies or access certain areas of the empire that were previously off limit. So there is a pro-business stance too. It's like maybe it needs to be refined because we can do this in a better way that can benefit both humanity, and the UEE and the economy without necessarily affecting the development of these species. So there's lots of different areas that it does split up into.
Were the Shi'an actually willing adversaries in the Cold War, or was it just the Messers using a conveniently scaring neighbor as a means of controlling the Empire? So.
Realmente los Xi'an tomarían parte en la supuesta guerra fría que había contra Xi'an y humanidad. Había una guerra fría ahí. ¿O realmente eran los Messer tomando ventaja de eso para mantener su imperio?
Who's done the reading?
I'd say a little of both.
Yeah. I mean,
Un poco de todo, dice Will.
What kicked it all off was basically some human terraformers came charging into a system and just started terraforming a planet without checking to see if it was uninhabited. So that doesn't send a great message. So there was definitely some antagonism from the Shi'an.
On the flip side, what's the most petty?
Que el tema de terraformar así un planeta sabiendo que había una especie que no fue un buen mensaje y que fue algo que generó conflicto.
Or a silly situation where the Shi'an would use anti-grav technology to solve a problem.
That's a great question.
Do we need to set up the Shi'an's admiration for anti-grav, or is that self-explanatory at this point?
No, I mean they're highly developed. They have really good anti-grav tech. A lot of the human knowledge of anti-gravity comes from our contact with the Shi'an and their technology.
Dice que los Xi'an tienen gran desconocimiento de tecnología antigravitatoria y que muchos de las cosas que nosotros tenemos de antigravedad pues vienen de la tecnología Xi'an.
I almost want to say that in their development timeline, like they came up with that before they came up with space travel.
Yes.
I believe so, yeah.
They did.
They're real good at it.
So what would be the most petty or silly situation they'd use anti-gravity for?
Let's see.
My idea is that so they use anti-grav at the dinner table so to like levitate tables and levitate chairs. So if Shi'an comes to join the big family meal and she finds that there's no chair, she'd just like whip out an anti-grav device and kind of hover there
Vale, dice que utilizan, por ejemplo, mesas antigravedad para cenar y tal, que si por ejemplo viene un Xian a comer a a la mesa familiar y no está previsto, pues simplemente pillará un dispositivo antigravedad y se pondrá ahí sentado, ¿no?
Like those extending seats that people bring that just sit back. Okay.
We have talked about like their kind of like ancestral clothing, these really like ornate outfits. So it'd be funny to me if something got like a really heavy outfit that has a bunch of intricate things sewn into it that they use a little helper device when they're walking around so they don't get weighed down.
Me dice que de alguna manera que es conocido por llevar atuendos que pueden ser muy cargados, ¿no? Muy tal. Entonces que podría ser interesante el ver que realmente lleven atuendos muy pesados y que se utilicen de dispositivos antigravedad para poder caminar sin que pesen demasiado.
All right. We are just about out of time. So
Oh, no.
a couple quick ones here. With the 2950 elections coming around, what are the candidates' feelings towards the way Tavaran within the Empire have been treated?
That's your quick last question?
We are just about out of time. So
Oh, no.
a couple quick ones here. With the 2950 elections coming around, what are the candidates' feelings towards the way Tavaran within the Empire have been treated?
That's your quick.
¿Cuáles son para respuesta rápida, cuáles son los pensamientos de los candidatos en la forma en la que los Tevarin han sido tratados a lo largo del Imperio?
Quick last question? Jeez.
Se están descojonando, en plan, ¿esa es solo tu última pregunta
man.
rápida?
All right, you want to do that? I'll do it.
No, we can do it. I just don't know.
No. You're gonna get a bad one next because of that.
Adam, go. You're the most fluent.
Yeah. It varies. Most of them would like to kind of like better integrate them into or at least are going to put forward the idea that they want to be better integrated into the Empire, because Koji has become a senator, because there does seem to be a rise of people of Tavaran kind of rediscovering their culture. So they're trying to appeal to that voter base.
A lot of the more extremist views on Tavaran and human alien species didn't make it into the final five. Though there's people out there that like to say it. I think the closest maybe like Paul Lassalle, who thinks they deserve equality but not special treatment, is kind of his stance on it.
Yeah, both Leilani Addison and Mira Nyo have called out specifically that they would probably create programs that would aim to better integrate the Tavaran into the Empire.
Claro, dice que hay varias corrientes, ¿no? La corriente que sería de hay tres que quieren crear como programas especiales para integrarlos mejor, otras personas que simplemente que se lo traten como iguales y que no tengan ningún privilegio.
Mira No, I think, would even want to set like a certain percentage of each UE office would had to have, let's say, 10% Tavaran working in it as a way to integrate their ideas and their influence into the UEE.
Otro pensamiento sería que pues como un 10% de los oficiales tienen que tener bajo su mando a Tevarins, algún Tevarin, o sea, tiene que tener un porcentaje de Tevarins bajo su mando, ¿no? Para poder integrarlos, que sea una manera de integrarlos en la web.
So there are some people that, if anything, are going to be more proactive about trying to get them to participate. There's no bad will in these final five candidates. If anything, they just would raise their hands and be like, they can lift themselves up by their own bootstraps and they have the same opportunity as anybody else if they want to.
Claro, luego también hay otros que dicen que tienen que tener las mismas oportunidades que cualquiera para que se integren correctamente.
Try to achieve that.
All right, the
Not
only
gonna
bad
get my
will is
vote.
here.
Yeah.
Oh.
This last question is exclusively for Will. Please do your best Banu impersonation.
Oh, hello.
La siguiente pregunta es para Will, por favor, haz tu mejor personificación de un vano y dice hola y ya está. O sea, no he hecho nada.
Yeah, that was it.
It's about what I've come to expect.
That worked for me. Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us here on Star Citizen Live Alien Week Roundtable. I hope you enjoyed our conversation about the lore, the history, the background of some of Star Citizen's alien races set to populate the persistent universe. As we have been doing the last couple of weeks, we are going to send the raid on over to another Star Citizen streamer. I'm being told it's Uber Nerd. So we are going to raid.
Bueno, pues le van a mandar ahí una redirección y eso es todo. Vamos a ver si cuentan algo
Made
más.
Uber Nerd today. So you should see that prompt coming up if you're watching live. You can opt in for that. Tell them Molly says hi. And for Star Citizen Live, I'm Jared. Let's see if I can get directions. That's Sherry. That's Dave. That was Will. That's Adam. And we'll see you next week, everybody. Take care.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye. Thanks so
Bye.
much.
Y eso es todo. Eso es todo por Star Citizen Live. Daros las gracias como siempre, chicos, por el pedazo de apoyo que me dais. Y me voy a echar un tretillo de Star Citizen. Nos vemos ahora.